there was the rabbit on skis that we did, and there was the ski poles and skis, and we did every time we have a challenge, we meet the challenge and we do incredible things. And the first thing I ever did when I started making chocolate was I wanted to make a long stem rose, and I was told that was not possible, based on the fragility of the item you're talking about. It cannot be done. And of course that then made me more inspired to make a long stem chocolate rose entirely made of chocolate. So I just accidentally by trial and error created a petal. That was the first challenge, was to make a petal that looked like an actual petal. So I found various articles, and I used a synthetic rose from a store, and I took it apart, and I took each petal and painted the petal with a very fine brush, very paper thin.
With dark chocolate?
Dark chocolate only, because dark chocolate is stronger than the milk chocolate would be. And I just brushed the petal, brushed the surface of the petal with the chocolate and let it harden, and it took on the contour and the curl and the curve at the end of the petal, and it just looked like exactly like you could imagine a real petal looking. And I peeled the petal away, and there was this extraordinary chocolate petal, and I couldn't believe it, and I was ecstatic. So then I thought, okay, I have achieved a paper thin chocolate petal. Now I have to create a rose. And so I continued with the petals until I achieved a bud, and then I had to put them together without melting them, because they literally were paper thin and it melts very easily. My hands, luckily, were very cooled hands, so I was able to put 3 petals together with chocolate and make it look like a rose bud. And it looked like a rose bud. Okay, this is getting me pumped. Okay, now I gotta do a stem. All right, how do I do a stem? I just took a fine tip, piping tip, and filled it with dark chocolate, and on parchment paper I drew a long strip of chocolate, and I did series of them on this sheet of parchment paper, a whole series of them. And as they started to set, I would release them so they wouldn't curl up with the parchment paper, so they would stay flat. And then I turned them over and I piped chocolate on the other side of the stem, so it was no longer flat, it was now 3-dimensional. I adhered 2 pieces of chocolate together and it became a round stem. And it was not perfect, as a stem is not. It had little wiggles in it, just like a stem would have, and imperfections like a stem would have. So I now have achieved a 3-dimensional long stem. Now, picking it up, I have to be very careful because it will break so easily. And it did several times, so I appreciated the fact that it was incredibly fragile. So acknowledging that, I left them alone. Now I had to figure out how I'm going to put the bud of the rose with the stem. So I made certain that as bringing the 3 petals together, there was enough of a hole at the bottom of the petals for the chocolate stem to be able to become part of the bud. And we adhered that with chocolate. And then there I am with the 3 petals looking like a chocolate bud, a rose bud with a long stem rose. And now I needed leaves. So I painted chocolate onto artificial leaves that had wires. So I was able to manipulate the bend or the curve of the leaf, and I painted the chocolate onto the leaf and let it set and peeled that off, and now I had rose leaves. And I adhered the rose leaves to the stem of the rose. I had 3 petals, I had a stem, and I had 4 leaves as they would be situated on a rose. Now I had to make it look as a rose would look. I needed the sepals that were curling as the leaf curls back and lets the rose expose itself. So I had to pipe thickened chocolate on the rose where the petal ends and the stem begins. And I had to turn it on its side and pipe that one and then let it firm, and then turn it on its side and let it firm, and then turn it on and let it firm. Now I had 3 petals, I had the sepals, I had the stem, and they had the 4 leaves. And I was looking at this magical dark chocolate rose, pure chocolate, no additional artificial tools, no wires, no anything. It was honest to gosh only chocolate rose. There wasn't anything else there but a chocolate rose. And I was ecstatic and I couldn't believe it. And I thought, okay, now what do I do? I can't pick it up. It will break if I pick it up. So now what do? I've made it, so what? Hooray for me. What do I do now?
So Deborah, you put it on display.
Yes, I put it in my chocolate shop. I cleared out a showcase. I laid a bed of white silk fabric on the bottom of the showcase. And I laid you hold it like you hold it like a baby. You have one hand underneath what I refer to as the bottom, or the baby, was the stem, and I had the other hand under the head of the baby, which was the bud. And I carried this rose and placed it on the satin, and I displayed it, and the response was overwhelming. And